Welcome to Accounting in the Wild, where we'll discuss various subjects in the tax and accounting world, also featuring tales from the field and interviews on various tax and accounting subjects. All this and much, much more on Accounting in the Wild. And now, here's your host, Jason Dynison.
Welcome to this episode of Accounting in the Wild, sponsored by MyCPE1. To earn CPE credits for watching or listening to this podcast, head over to my-cpe.com. Make sure to include the hyphen, my-cpe.com, and continue your professional learning journey. Our guest today is Andrea Millar with Andrea Millar Life Coaching. Normally, we try to cut out the stereotypical introductory parts like tell us about yourself, and we just kind of get on with the podcast when we start, but we've left that in today, the tell us about yourself part, because Andrea has a fascinating journey in the accounting world. She now does life coaching, but she's been a CPA and worked the 100-hour work week grind of tax season. She also once worked for AICPA as well. In this episode, we talk about maintaining mental health during tax season and other busy times. And now to Accounting in the Wild, sponsored by MyCPE1. Hi, welcome to another episode of Accounting in the Wild. We have Andrea Millar with us from Andrea Millar Life Planning. So first of all, hello, Andrea, and welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Jason. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Now, I'm going to start with the stereotypical tell us about yourself question, but I think I need to preface this by saying you have a background that I think is interesting because you have lived the life of an accountant. I don't know, are you still living the life of an accountant, or have you moved on? You've moved on from that, but you have done this, looks like reading your bio for quite a while. You lived the life of an accountant. So tell us a little about Andrea Millar and your background and how you got where you are today.
Yeah, I'll just start. Of course, I majored in accounting in school and went to work for a Big Four accounting firm. So I started in tax. Thankfully, I knew, because I think tax is much better than audit. But tax got me into knowing that, like, I worked with the individuals, and I worked with a lot of people that had flowed through entities, and then it flowed through to the individuals. So thank goodness I just happened to land there, because then I had a love for financial planning. So I blended tax and financial planning, but of course I had all the tax returns and all the deadlines. I remember working 100-hour weeks, and it was actually a badge of honor. Like, I was like, look, we would all compare. How many did you get this week? And it was like, that was like the star. Who could have worked the most? And so, yes, I was heavy into that. Then I did that for years. I think I did 13 tax seasons. And that was different places, because I won't get into all of that because we could take up your whole time for the podcast. But I went to worked at KPMG and Deloitte and a bank. And eventually I landed at AICPA, where I was the director of financial planning, and where a lot of those professionals also blend tax and financial planning. But what followed me everywhere was always working. Like, it wasn't actually for me, which you might have too, Jason, I don't know. For me, I worked around the clock doing taxes. And yes, that was the worst, like just the nature of the deadline and not having a choice and all of that. Although looking back, I did have choices that I could have made it a lot better. I carried that work ethic, which my family had a giant work ethic, and that's a great thing, but there's an unhealthy and healthy side of everything, right? So I took that work ethic with me wherever I went, because I love work. It's like, it's an accomplishment. You can do well. You feel good about yourself. So I did that up until at AICPA. I worked for years. I loved that position. I got to work with CPAs who were financial planners and tax professionals. And it was just a whole other way to look at it. But while I was there, I had what you call wake-up calls, 3 things happened in a row because I needed three wake-up calls to be able to start paying attention to what I was doing in life. And I had November 2014, my dad was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Early May 2015, my niece tried to commit suicide, and and that was March. And the end of March 2015, the person who was the love of my life just dropped dead of a pulmonary embolism at a very young age. So, very hard stuff and hard to go through a lot of sadness. And at the same time, it made me start paying attention to what am I doing? Like, why? Like, I was killing myself. I'd work so much that I would just have to sleep all day Saturday to even function again.
Mhm.
And this wasn't even taxes. This was just how I was wired, thinking that this is what I have to do. And I'd put everything on the back burner, everything else on the back burner. So through that, I did a lot of investigating. Like I started seeking out, how do I get more fulfillment? How do I design my life? But it seems so simple, but it's not easy to figure out. And I didn't know all the stuff about how humans are wired and the internal stuff that nobody teaches you unless you just stumble on it. So then I landed on a life planning certification, and that helped me a lot with figuring out how to know what I wanted, but also then I practiced on other people of how to bring that out of them. And I loved that. And the one thing after doing that was what I found was most of the time what got in people's way was themselves. But that certification didn't help me with that. So then I went on to get other coaching certifications that help me understand the human experience and how humans are wired so that we can, because most of us are having our lives run by this internal stuff we don't even know is going on. So you can say intellectually you want something, but then you wonder, why am I not doing that? And but if you understand how all of this works, then it makes it much easier to navigate. So now that's what I do life planning and coaching, and most of my clients are accountants and financial planners.
Yeah, and it is tax season as this is going to air. And so that's why I really wanted to talk to you now, is to talk about getting through tax season and I think just the feel in general, because I used to think, oh, well, it's okay to work all these hours because it ends April 15th and then you can
Yeah.
just take time off. But I don't know. That doesn't seem, maybe I was just young and naive, but it just seems like it never really did stop. I mean, yeah, the 100-hour work weeks stop. But you just go back to 40 to 50 hours. You don't ever
Yeah.
get to take like 0 hours for a long stretch of time. So it all balances out. And so
Yeah.
here we are. You mentioned something, killing ourselves during tax season. And yeah, I'm a former, would you believe I used to work in radio as a news reporter long ago in a prior life before I became an
Mhm.
accountant. And so words and usage of words and, words matter is something that I was taught long ago, to be careful about how you say things. And I think that what you said about killing yourself in tax season is true, isn't it? Like that's not just
Yeah.
an offhand, like, oh yeah, killing myself. That like when
Yeah.
we work 100-hour work weeks or 80
Yeah.
hours or whatever, and we're sitting all day working on a freaking tax return, for crying out
Yeah.
loud, we really are. That's bad for our
Yes.
health. Like we literally are killing ourselves, aren't we?
Yes, we are. And so many people you hear, like what we were talking about yesterday, they die at
Yes.
their desk or they
Yes.
put off some medical thing because they're like, okay, everything goes on the back burner. I will work on having connection with my partner after tax season. I'm having this problem physically, but I will go to the doctor and handle that after tax season. And then when you go handle it, who knows what's happened?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what? Well, let's back up. What are some tips that you would give to an accountant? I know there's so many things we could
Yeah.
say. Maybe pick a few that you would give to any tax pro who is trying to survive tax season right now.
Yeah. Well, the first one, because I don't want to ignore it because it's such a big thing, and then we'll get to the practical strategies. But to me, and trying to sum up this human experience in the simplest, quickest way possible, is our subconscious runs at 11, it processes 11 million bits of information per second. Our conscious mind processes about 25 bits of information per second. So our life is often lived by our conscious mind. So what we need to do to resolve the different issues that happen is one, raise to the conscious level from our subconscious the beliefs, the deep-seated beliefs that we have that make us think we have to do something a certain way that is killing us. So one, you need to kind of pay attention and get yourself like, just ask yourself a question. Do I have to do it this way? Like, see the truth of the matter, because a lot of times we have deep-seated beliefs that have maybe it worked for us when we were younger, it protected us for whatever reason, but it's not working anymore. So just try to raise, like if you're having a hard time, try to raise like what's happening underneath. What's the thought that's leading to that behavior or the belief leading to that behavior? And then conversely, we need to figure out what we really want, like as tax season, just as simple as how do I want this to run? Visualize how you want it to be. How do you want your day to flow? And when you get intentional like that and like really reflect on it, and I know that it's never perfect. You have all kinds of things happening during tax season and but isn't it better to have a guide that you're trying to go by than to have nothing and just let it all go wild? So having kind of a vision for how you want tax season to play out and then putting that into, well, how should my day flow? And like have some non-negotiables in there about the things you're going to do to fuel yourself because you need fuel now more than ever. And so, but when you plant that, that's now planted in your subconscious. But you also kind of have to train your brain to do that stuff because it's planted there, but you've got to train it before, you know, how it's autopilot, but we've got to autopilot's like, you know, we do stuff and we don't even notice we're doing it. It just, you know, you drive somewhere and you get there and you're like, how did I get here? Because I wasn't even thinking about it. Well, we can actually be intentional to design what we want to be on autopilot, but we have to train our brain. So to me, that's the simplest way to say why it's so important to reflect. And so that would be the first strategy is like visualize, have a vision for how you want it to go. And then what does that mean for how your day and week needs to play out? I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, where do you want to stop and actually go have dinner and have time for something nutritional? Do you want to have some water on your desk? Like, how are you going to get in the proper amount of sleep? Because there's probably nothing more important right now than getting good sleep. And guess what? If you actually get a good sleep, you're going to work faster and do better work. So it's counterintuitive that working around the clock, not sleeping, not exercising, not drinking water, eating crap, like that's actually gonna take more time or not being intentional about how you flow your day because every time you get distracted or get pulled in another direction, it takes 20 minutes to get back to where you were. So if you can be real intentional about that, we treat it like it's life and death as CPAs. I know because I did. I mean, I'm the worst example of all of this, except for luckily I didn't die at my desk or like have some major medical issue. Um, but we can design how it is. It's not life and death. The client can wait for you to call them back. You don't need to answer the phone when it rings because you're going to get distracted. You got to give yourself some laser focused time to just get things done, or else it will take much longer. Like being mindful about how you design where you have the most energy, and all of us are different. Like some people, I know I worked at firms where it was like you gotta have FaceTime, and hopefully there's more hybrid or remote now, so people can design it how they want. But the starting time was like that's not. I'd rather work really late and then start a little, start later the next day. That's how I'm gonna give my best. And if you're in a firm where that's not a possibility, then communicate how you're going to do, because at the end of the day, don't we all just want great results, great client service? We're all and like healthy and able to give our best. And and yeah, so that's my first thought on that.
So there's a few things that I would say on that. One is that, it's not life or death to, especially for so many CPAs. I mean, bigger firms are charging more, but a lot of the smaller
Mhm.
firms, they might be charged a couple $100 for a tax return. It's like,
Yeah,
this is not something where, like, you don't,
yeah,
I don't know. I guess I'm just trying to say it's not life or death. I'm
yeah,
agreeing with you on that,
yeah.
that, you know, and my other question is, just because someone works 80 hours, that doesn't mean they're twice as effective as the person who works
Mhm.
40 hours, does it?
It does not. I think there's studies that show it's like 4 to 6 hours of ability to have like green energy, which is your
Mm-hmm.
ability to do deep work, which is why it's so critical to make sure you're having that time blocked out for the deep work because you can really, and once you go past that, you're not that effective and it takes longer. And so making sure you have that work at the time of day that's most where you're going to be your best is
Mm-hmm.
huge. And then do the stuff that's easier, like go respond to emails before you go home when you're already spent. And who cares? Like you're responding to emails.
Yeah.
So just being mindful like that.
Now, well, I guess let's move on
Okay.
to other tips that you might have. We could probably talk for hours and hours on this subject, but let's move
Yeah.
on, and any other tips that you want to give.
Yeah, I think making sure that you pay attention to your body, because a lot of times we're just in our logical mind, but we're not connecting how our body feels. So there's an acronym called HALT, which is hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. And it just reminds you because this is a time where you're probably going to get angry because I can't imagine you get through taxis. Somebody's not going to annoy you, and it's okay to be angry. But when you're these things like it sounds so obvious, but paying attention to how you're feeling and what you need and give it to yourself. Like if you're hungry, don't keep sitting there and try to grind through it. You're not going to do
Mm-hmm.
very well.
Mm-hmm.
So just paying attention to your body and what your body's telling you, which goes back to what we said, like if your body's having an issue that needs attention by a doctor, then do it. But if you can just actively make sure you're paying attention to your body and not just stuck in your head all the time, it's pretty wise what it tells us and what we need. And if we pay attention to that and act on it, it can just make us in a lot better shape. It might make us. I had a client who had a broken foot for 2 weeks and hadn't even noticed it. How do you not notice a broken foot? And just so it sounds obvious, but people don't pay attention. And especially accountants, we're in our heads. I know
Mm-hmm.
I actively have to work to get out of my head intentionally. And the body's so wise. It often tells us things that are more wise and important than some people call it the monkey mind and our that's a whole other topic, but the things that we let run us that might maybe aren't as wise.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and I think, you mentioned you had the three things that happened all in a row. I had a major medical incident during tax season one time 6 years ago. And I came home from that And the first thing I did was open my computer because it was March 14th when I got back home, and I had to extend entity tax returns that were due the next day. And that was literally the first thing I did when I walked in the door
Mhm.
home from the hospital after a
Wow.
7-day hospital stay is I
Wow.
filed extensions on business tax returns.
Yeah.
And the thing for me was I had an incident that, like, there was no choice but to go to the hospital.
Hmm.
I couldn't get by for 2 weeks with a broken foot or whatever. But
Yeah.
I think that one of the things that I think that we're trying to get across to people, both you and me, on talking about this is
Hmm.
don't don't let it reach the point where it's like there's major things that happen where the universe is telling you you need to change. Make changes before, because inevitably something's going to happen in your
Yeah.
life, whether it's to you or to someone you love, people who are important to you. It could be a health problem. It could be a tornado or a hurricane blows through and
Yeah.
destroys your house. I mean, something is going to happen because that's life. And
Yeah.
if you're not prepared, I don't know, if you're not doing anything other than I've got to work all the time,
Yeah.
you're going to be the universe is going to force you to not
Yeah.
work.
Exactly. That's how it happens over and over.
Yeah. Yeah. what what are some, I mean, you've worked in the field and you still work with accountants. I mean, why don't things change? I mean, you talk about how we wear this like a badge of honor. I worked 80 hours, or I worked 82, or whatever. And it's tax season, or there's audit season for the people who choose to do audits. I'm like you. I was always drawn to tax. Auditing was by far, auditing and cost accounting. I
Oh
hated those
gosh,
classes.
yes.
I hated
Me
them.
too.
So it's like,
Yeah, that brings back nightmares. Yeah.
right. So moving on, I guess.
Yes.
But there's audit
Yeah,
season
tax is a
too.
great place to be. These people who are listening that we're talking to, tax is a wonderful, fun place to be if we could just design it well, isn't it?
Yes. But why don't we? That's the question. Why? I mean, I know there are firms, and I'm jealous of them. They say, well, we're working 40-hour work weeks, and
Yeah,
whatever gets done by April 15th gets done. And if it
yeah,
doesn't get done by April 15th, it goes on extension. And guess what? The world will keep turning and the sun
yeah,
will come up. Your tax return will get done and nothing bad will happen to you.
yep.
And it's like, I could sit, and this gets back to that
Oh,
subconscious,
yes, that's
because
what's happening. Yeah,
I can sit here and I can pump my fist like this and say, "Yeah, you go." But then I don't do that myself with my clients,
true.
and probably 90% of other accountants, 95%, they don't do that with their
Hmm.
clients. They kill themselves during tax season. And
Yeah.
why do you think it is that nothing changes?
Well, I mean, I think if we're the underlying is what we've talked about with the subconscious and conscious and being aware of that. But we think, as I know, because I've been there, we think that we have no choice but to do it the way we're doing it. Oh my gosh, it's a mandated government deadline. And I've got all these clients and I have a business and I want to serve them well. Like that client deserves to have my best attention and service. But there are a lot of choices. What I have found is like say continuing to say yes to clients who are maybe what you call a PETA. I'm not going to
Mhm.
say it. So a big thing, because I have a couple clients now who work 30 hours during tax season. And one of the biggest things they did was think about the clients they wanted to serve And like, what are the attributes? Because so many people think about demographics or whatever. Like, no, what are the attributes? Like, kind people, people who value what you do, people who value your life, and knowing that you're going to do better for them if they aren't so demanding or like, because again, on their side, this isn't life or death. They just need to trust you. So, just making sure that you're, and it might be hard the first tax season if you have a lot of clients. You really, I can't tell you, people have so many clients they shouldn't have. And they keep adding, and then they don't get rid of the ones that really aren't good fits because they like those people. Like it might be they enjoy those people and they don't want to disappoint them. Guess what? They'll be okay. They'll find somebody else. So one of my clients has a chopping list. So because it's so easy after tax season to forget about some bad things that happened where a client, for instance, a PETA client was running you ragged and all this stuff. Put that person's name on a chopping list so that after tax season, you don't forget to get rid of them. And yes, you can do that in a kind way, but also get clear on the clients that you're working with that you're like, what I don't care if you like them or not. If you're killing yourself and you're barely making it, then you need to weed some people out. And you're not the only person who can serve them. There are other people building businesses and they have openings and it all works that way. So I think people think that if they don't serve that client, the client's just so the poor client, they're not going to get what they need. They will get what they need, but you don't have to be the one. So learning to say no for one, like if a client comes in that's not your ideal and you have plenty of business, like say no. If you feel better to have some referrals, you can send them to, great. And then if you have clients that aren't a good fit, go ahead after tax season and let them know that, you can do it in a kind way. Just say, this is how I'm doing my business now. And they probably understand how business works. And so I've got to focus on, they'll get it and they'll go on. And then of course, the PETA clients, get rid of them. And so I think it keeps going because we don't do those things.
Yeah.
That's been probably number one of all of my clients, even if they're ones not in tax season, that refined how they work and how the business runs, is being really mindful of that. And
Yeah.
then raise prices. Like,
Yeah.
don't forget that. Yeah.
I think now this is for me, I guess I can't speak for everybody, but this is something that comes up with people that I talk to about this too. There's also a fear that
Oh, yeah.
if we make any changes, we're going to lose all of our clients.
Oh, yeah.
And then, it's like a farmer not having a crop or something.
Yeah.
It's like all of our money is gone. We have, it's all over for us. If we do anything to rock the boat, it might, maybe nobody comes back. What if nobody comes back? And what I've discovered is, especially on things like raising rates, nobody really cares.
Yeah.
You really don't lose people. Like, I've been in groups where people are like, yeah, I raised my rates 50% and I lost one client.
Yeah.
And it's like,
and it might have been a client that was great to lose because they might have been the ones to complain about the fee in the first place.
That's what they said. Was what they said. When I analyzed that account, I realized that we were losing money on them anyway. Even if they had paid the higher fee, we would have been losing money on them. And it's like, first of all, how much money are we leaving on the table if we're thinking about making money? And actually, I think making money ties in not to working 100-hour work weeks, but I think that you're a little more willing to be like, okay, it's busy season. I can work 50 hours this week if I have to. If I'm getting paid a decent wage to do that. But there's a lot of us now. I come at this from a smaller, solo or smaller firm viewpoint. But if you're charging $200 to prepare a tax return, you are not getting adequately compensated even
No.
for a 40-hour work week, let alone a 100-hour work week.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
It
so,
does. And
yeah.
people, yeah, you're right. That fear thing that takes over, that's that subconscious conscious thing that's going
Yeah.
on. So you got to raise the stuff to ask yourself if that's true and then do little tests, do little experiments, test it out. Like people think I have to do this with like test it out with a couple of people. See, do the rest of them leave because you let a couple of them go? What I find with my clients is once you open up the space, like if there is space, I think a lot of the people probably listening here, there is no space. So you need to make space that doesn't then get filled unless it's getting filled in the hours that you've designed back to designing your day and week to make so your whole life works together. But you having enough space, but it always comes in. Like it's unbelievable the amount of times you free up that space and then somebody you'd much rather work with that's a much better engagement. It just comes in. I don't know how it happens, but it does. But also they've gotten clear on who they want to come in. And that's back to planting in your subconscious because it just you start automatically doing things that that align to that when you're clear on it. But a lot of times we're working so much, we don't take time for these things to get clear.
Well, and I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of accountants, even somewhat bigger firms, that they don't drive the bus. It's
Hmm.
like the client drives the bus, and there's
Yes.
hundreds, if not thousands, of clients, and they're
Yeah.
all pushing
Yeah.
on the steering wheel, and the
Yeah.
accountant is somewhere back in the
Yeah.
back of the bus or something. And it's like
Yeah.
a lot of times I feel a lot of times like it's I have no control over this, even though this is my business. And
Yeah.
I think that that is something that you've talked about it. It's like
Hmm.
put the guardrails in place and like this is
Yeah.
your business. How do you want it to run? And your
Yeah.
client will either follow along with what you want or they won't. And if they
Yeah.
won't, why would you want to work with them to begin with?
Exactly. And people actually like structure. It makes them comfortable, like they know what to expect. And so if you are having where clients are just all over, you're just running after that client and this client and all of that, it's probably because there's not structure. And if you can figure out the structure that works and how you want to run things, then you let them know most good clients respect that. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, even like I won't do your tax return if I don't get your stuff by X date. Like you
Yeah.
will be extended. People are like, okay, and then they'll fall in line and give it to you when you need it. And you can make, I have my one of my clients, finishes everything by April 5th because she actually got clients that she has more control over because she does the bookkeeping and all that stuff. So she can do the tax return when she wants to, and they're not K1 kind of clients. So you can even look at something like that, like who she has writers and she does everything for them and there's no other stuff coming in. So she can just start the tax returns in January and then she's done.
Yeah.
That's the one that works 30 hours a week, but she used to work 7 days a week around the
Yeah.
clock. Yeah.
Yeah.
And she makes more money now, by the way.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
And she's
One of the
happier. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I bet. Now, one of the things that I wrote down way back in the beginning when you were introducing
Uh,
yourself, actually, and it's the last point that I have on my list. It doesn't necessarily have to be the last thing we talk about, but it's
mm-hmm.
your why and figuring
Mm-hmm.
that out. That's really where a lot of this starts, isn't it? Not just your
Yeah.
why of, I don't know, it's like your why of everything
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
kind of my perception of it. Like, why are you doing what you're doing? And why are you
Yeah.
doing it this way? And how do you want your life, not just your business, your
Yeah.
life to be?
Yeah. Yeah. And there are ways to figure that stuff out, but we don't need to make it that hard. you can just even think like, what are the five most important areas of my life right now? Most people are going to have something about their relationships and their family or their partner or their kids or their children or their friends. Another's probably how you want to be as a professional and the work that you do and the contributions that you make. Or if you're retired, you're volunteering and things like that. And then the other is just like how, like taking care of yourself. Like if we had to simplify this as much as possible, those are probably the three overarching buckets that probably everybody has: vitality, contribution, and connection. So even if you started there, like, and just decide, okay, is how are each of those areas of my life? Is my life right now aligned, like how I would like my life to be, and then how I look at my life and what's actually happening? Where are the disconnects? Because then if you can see that clearly, you can just start to shift, and it doesn't have to be some giant shift. You can do one little thing at a time, and then it's amazing what that does over time. So none of the, I know a lot of people talk about purpose and why, like what is that? It's already there. You just you just look at what's important to me right now, and then as you live that way, then other stuff comes along and you're paying attention, and something else might become important because you're living in that way and paying attention. It just becomes
Mhm.
clear. Um, but it starts simple, like just how would you like to be spending your day during tax season, and how are you spending your day? Does it align with what's most important to you? Are you okay ignoring your most important relationships for 2 months, knowing that anything can happen in this life and we might have just missed something important? So I think that's the simplest way to try to look at that.
And I used to think it was funny, the little memes and the stuff about like, don't talk to me, it's tax season, or
Oh
like,
yeah.
or it's January 31st, we'll see you on April 16th or whatever.
Yes.
And now I
Yeah.
realize that's not, I mean, I understand the kind of grim humor or whatever of people trying to get through it, but it's not really funny, is it? And
It's
like when
not.
we hear this, I mean, I know you and I we talked yesterday to kind of plan this. We both know multiple accountants who literally have died at their desk. I
Yes.
know enrolled agents who have keeled over from heart attacks at like midnight while
Gosh.
sitting at their desk working on tax returns. And people
Beautiful.
will be
Yeah.
like, "Oh, well, they died doing what they love." And it's like, did they really? Is that
Yeah.
really true? I don't think
Yeah.
that's true.
Yeah.
The,
I don't think
and
many
that's
people, if they could choose, would choose that way to go.
no,
No.
no, no. And so I this is it's just such an important. I think that you will be a guest here again because I think
Yeah.
there's
Anytime.
I think there's so
Yeah.
much that we could talk about on this,
Yeah.
and so many coping strategies, and we only touched on, I think, the tip of the iceberg today
Right.
on some
It
of the
is.
coping strategies.
You could
Yes.
go, and each one you could go on and on,
Yeah.
but if people, like anything, if you just take one thing away and then take action on that thing, that's huge. So don't make it some, oh my God, what you're telling me I've got to revamp my schedule and have this ideal thing, and I'm just trying to survive right now. But
Right.
if there's just one thing you could take away that you could make happen to make your life a little better this tax season, that's a great starting point. Need more sleep, if you need some nutritious food, get up and go get it for yourself. Three, I would say we kind of like paying attention to your energy. Know when you're most energized. Like we can only do 4 or 5 hours or 6 hours tops of like deep work each day. So being really mindful of where you do that, because every time you let something distract you, if you're the kind of person always answering an email, always picking up the phone, try to make that a certain time of day, because that takes 20, you're going to spend so much more time than you need to. One, and two, if you can do the deep work at your best time and not let other distractions in, that's going to make it go so much faster and you're actually going to do better work. And then four, I just say communication. Like communication is kind of what we're talking about with It might be some things you need to refine after tax season, but you really train your clients how you want them to be. And they're going to be okay. They just need you to kind of tell them when you can get back to something. You don't have to just run after them and chase them. You can design it how you want because what they want is the best work, right? They want you to do what they hired you to do. So do it in a way that works best for you and then communicate that to them. If you're worried that's going to derail your whole business, try it out and see if you can take little steps and see. So hopefully that's kind of a few succinct points that will give people something they can latch onto.
Yeah, well, and I think that you've just given me an idea for probably 5 more podcasts that we could do over the next, 12
Yes.
months or so.
Yes.
Have you come back and talk about point number 1 for a while?
Sure.
And
Yes, all of them can go on and on. Yeah.
There you go. We've got it all planned out, I guess. Well, Andrea, if people listening to this want to learn a little more, what is your website or the best way that people could maybe get in touch with you or find out more about you?
It's a mouthful, but it's Andrea Millar lifeplanning.com. So it's AndreaMillar lifeplanning.com.
Okay. Well, perfect. Andrea Millar, thanks so much for joining us, and we'll have you back again several times in the future, I'm sure. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thanks so much, Jason.
Thank you to Andrea Millar at Andrea Millar Life Coaching for talking to us about the important subject of mental health for accountants and tax professionals. This episode of Accounting in the Wild is brought to you by MyCPE1. To earn CPE credits for watching or listening to this podcast, head over to my-cpe.com and continue your professional learning journey. And catch us again next time on another episode of Accounting in the Wild.
Thanks for listening, and join us next time for another edition of Accounting in the Wild with Jason Dynison.